You know for certain who your mother is. A baby comes out of one body, no test required. But your father, for almost the entire human story, there was no way to prove it. None. A man could suspect or assume, but never actually know. And ancient people handled that gap in ways that sound impossible today. In the Amazon, one child could have 3 fathers at once. On some islands, people insisted fathers had nothing to do with making a baby. So did ancient humans really know who the father was? And what happens to a society built on a question it can never answer? Let's start with the crack that runs under this entire story. Motherhood is a fact. Fatherhood is a guess. A mother is linked to her child by an event everyone can see. A father is linked by a private moment, months earlier, that leaves no proof at all. Anthropologists have a blunt little phrase for it. Mama's baby, papa's maybe. And that one tiny gap of doubt quietly shaped enormous parts of how humans organize themselves. Here's why it mattered so much. Raising a human child is brutally expensive. Years of food, protection, and care. A man's genes have a huge stake in spending all of that on his own child, and a huge risk in wasting it on someone else's. So evolution handed us some strange tools to manage the uncertainty. One of them is hiding in plain sight. Human females, unlike most primates, don't advertise when they're fertile. No swelling, no color, no signal. Ovulation is concealed, even from the woman herself, often. And that hidden window makes paternity even blurrier, which may be exactly the point. A man who can't tell when it matters has to stick around all the time. Concealed ovulation may have helped glue couples together, but some societies found a cleaner fix. Just build your whole family around the parent you can be sure of. In matrilineal cultures, descent runs through the mother because she's the unbreakable link, and it leads to something that stuns modern people. In many of these societies, a man doesn't invest in his wife's children, he invests in his sisters, his nieces, and nephews. Because whatever else is uncertain, his sister's kids definitely share his blood. For a lot of human history, the man raising you and teaching you wasn't your father. It was your uncle, because biology could guarantee the one bond your fathers never could. Now here's where it gets genuinely wild. Across much of the Amazon, by some estimates up to 70% of lowland South American cultures, people didn't just tolerate paternity doubt. They built a whole belief system on top of it. It's called partible paternity, and the idea is that a baby isn't made in one moment. It's built up gradually from the contributions of every man a woman is with during her pregnancy. So a child doesn't have a father, it has fathers, a primary one and often 1 or 2 secondary ones, all publicly acknowledged, all on the hook. To us, that sounds like chaos. It was actually insurance. Anthropologists Stephen Beckerman and Paul Valentine studied the Barí people, and the numbers are striking. A Barí child with a recognized secondary father was about 16% more likely to survive to age 15. Why? A second father meant a second man bringing fish and meat, a second protector if the first one died. Among the Ache people of Paraguay, extra fathers helped shield children from violence, the leading cause of death for kids there. In a world where one hunting accident could leave a child with nothing, spreading fatherhood across several men wasn't primitive. It was a survival strategy. The anthropologist Sarah Hrdy points out that humans are cooperative breeders. We're one of the only apes that will happily let other people hold and feed our babies. Raising a child was always meant to be a team sport, never a solo act. And Partible paternity just wrote extra players onto the team. And it goes further. On the Trobriand Islands, the anthropologist Bronisław Malinowski recorded a society that publicly held that sex doesn't cause pregnancy at all, that ancestral spirits entered women and planted the child. Now, some of you are thinking these people were just ignorant of basic biology. Almost certainly not. It's far better understood as a different social technology, a way of deciding that a child belongs to a whole web of people, not one man's bloodline. When you can't prove who the father is, one very smart answer is to make fatherhood something you choose and share. So what flipped us from that to the world we know? The one obsessed with knowing. In a word, property. For most of human history, there wasn't much to inherit. But when farming arrived and people began owning land, herds, and wealth that could be passed down, paternity stopped being a private shrug and became an obsession. Suddenly, a man needed to know his heir was actually his. And what many anthropologists argue grew out of that anxiety is a huge chunk of the world we still live in. Marriage as a binding contract, the fixation on female faithfulness, the whole idea of legitimate versus illegitimate children, and the policing of women's bodies to guarantee a bloodline. Our own anatomy even carries a fossil of this history. Human testicles are about 3 times bigger than a gorilla's, but 5 times smaller than a chimpanzee's. Chimps, where females mate with many males, need huge sperm factories to compete. Gorillas with one dominant male barely need any. We sit right in the middle, the body of a species whose past was mostly, but not perfectly, faithful. Our biology is still whispering about a paternity gamble our ancestors were quietly playing. In other words, your anatomy is a compromise between a gorilla's confidence and a chimp's paranoia. And then, in the 1980s, DNA testing did in a single afternoon what spirits, marriage, and jealousy never could in 100,000 years. It made fatherhood provable, which sets up the twist. When scientists finally measured how often the presumed father isn't the biological one, across huge populations, some going back centuries, the number came out around 1 to 2%. Let that land. The threat that men rebuilt entire civilizations to control, that reshaped marriage, law, and women's freedom, the great paternity betrayal, was, statistically, almost never even happening. So look at what father actually was for almost all of human history. It was never a fact you could prove. It was a role you chose to play. The man who stayed, who came back with food, who put himself between a child and the dark. Biology handed us certain mothers and unknowable fathers, and human culture spent thousands of years straining to close that gap. With spirits, with many fathers, with marriage, with control, until a lab finally closed it overnight. But here's the thing that lab could never test for. The oldest, truest definition of a father was never hiding in a strand of DNA. It was never really about whose genes a child carried. For most of the human story, a father was simply the one who showed up, and kept showing up. Your ancestors had no way to measure that, and no way to prove it. They just had to decide to be it. And maybe that's still the only test that ever actually mattered. For more on how the human family was really built, subscribe. This is Sketchient. And if you want to know how those same ancient couples decided to stay together in the first place, how they fell in love, watch this next.